Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome, everybody, to Sparkle SOS, Book Authors and Publishers. My name is Debbie Horovich, and I'm your host this afternoon. Sparkle SOS, Book Authors and Publishers is a sort of infrequent interview show that I've been doing for about 5 years now. And what we do is we interview successful and accomplished book authors, very often also aspiring book authors. And we interview them about the experience of becoming a book author, what's working for them, what's not working for them, what sort of surprises came up through the experience, and really what tips and tricks they have for the audience. So this afternoon, I'm super excited to finally be speaking to, and as well face-to-face, be speaking with Tim Alison, who is actually one of my clients at Social Sparkle and Shine. And what we're doing at Social Sparkle and Shine is really helping book authors confidently navigate the waters of self-publishing, the world of self-publishing, and all of the decisions that they have to make so that their books can be published in their vision and accomplish the objectives that they have. So welcome, Tim. Tim is the author of Screw The Naysayers book, recently produced and published on Amazon. And also he is the founder and the owner of Screw The Naysayers Productions, which is really the reason why I wanted to speak to him today, because Screw The Naysayers as a brand has really taken on so many different types and facets. And that's why I wanted to talk to Tim today, to get him to share all of the direction that he took and the decisions that he had to make, and really the order that he came up with the idea and the concept of these different elements. I'm sorry if you heard me hit the microphone. It's a little bit new. No. I've got a brand new microphone and I just tapped it accidentally. So sorry about that. Yeah. But we'll just keep on going. So as I was saying, what really fascinated me about Tim is that he's really taking Screw The Naysayers as a book and as a brand to so many different people by repurposing the content and the message to many different platforms. And that's it's such a valuable insight to take away. So we're here. Welcome, Tim. Thank you for joining me today. If you could please tell the audience about yourself, who you help, why you work with them, why they need it, and what's going on with you these days.
Okay, that last way you asked that question. First of all, thank you for having me, Debbie. It's a pleasure, and it is nice to see face to face over the internet here. There's a lot going on, and so I'm almost not sure where to start. I'm a lifelong entrepreneur. I've for more than 30 years been self-employed. I guess my main claim to fame was way back in my 20s. I walked away from one of the best paying sales jobs in the country, in Canada at the time, and moved to this tiny little fishing village in rural Nova Scotia. It's my wife's place of birth. And, as you can imagine, we hear about a lot of people escaping the rat race today, but 30 years ago, not so common. And it's always kind of amused me because as a result, that story has attracted a lot of attention, over the years. I think I was at this stage. I mean, I had a very successful run as an entrepreneur. I had an educational software company, and we grew that to somewhere around 10 million in sales, which from where we were at is something I take a lot of pride in. I mean, people shouldn't assume that makes me wealthy. You spend a lot of money when you're in business, but we accomplished everything we wanted. I'm happy, and I wouldn't change anything because we were able to live the life we wanted. we wanted to come down here and we wanted to raise our kids in this little rural village. Sure, I still had to travel in business as I had before, but it wasn't like leaving family behind in Toronto. We didn't even lock the doors, we still don't. We perhaps recently started, but for the most part, it was routine to go to the shopping store and leave the doors unlocked with your wallet on the front seat and walk into the store and not worry about it. It's just that it's just been this kind of a place, and it was about spending time with family and my kids. And so I think I learned earlier than some, that there's so many things in life we can't put a dollar value on. And so here I found myself, getting up to the later stages of my career and reflecting upon all those lessons learned. I get frustrated that we're continuing to raise, our youth with a value system that is focused on financial success. It's focused on how fast we check off the boxes. A good friend of mine, the very first guest on my podcast series was a guy named Don Wettrick. But, he talks about what he calls the big lie. And that is that we're still telling people in 2018 that the only path to success is a 4-year degree program from a university. And there's no other way to, if you want to be truly, successful. He's an educator. We love education. We're not saying education is bad. But there's a million different ways to achieve success, so it's all about the whole project started because when I started thinking about interests of full disclosure, I actually wrote a book around this story 12 years ago, which very thankfully had very limited distribution. Those that read it actually really liked it. It evoked a lot of emotion and a lot of tears, and it was about the family and all those kind of things. And it was absolutely my truth, at the time. But, looking back, I realized I wrote it as a hero's journey, to try and I don't think, 20-year-old or 18-year-old or, 25-year-old people need a story from some 60-year-old saying, well, if you just do whatever I did, 30 years ago, you'll be successful. Because the way I succeeded in the world I was living in is entirely different than the world we're living in now. What I tried to do this time, and this is what made the writing process very uncomfortable at times, was to actually look at the painful moments, to look at how do I talk about the things that were really hard for me. Like, how making it clear that walking away from, it's easy for me to say now I walked and brag about walking away from that job, but I agonized over it. Right?
Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah. I tell people I know that I was an entrepreneur the day that I turned Gary Vaynerchuk down to interview for a job at VaynerMedia in New York City.
Oh my, yeah.
That was the day that I knew I'm an entrepreneur. I'm working for myself. I don't want a job with anybody.
Yeah, because you probably couldn't have done a whole lot better than that. But
I definitely agonized over that decision, and it was not easy.
Yeah. You see, we do, and the underlying message that I think I tried to get across in the book, and that I'm trying to, now making my purpose in life is that even it's our self-beliefs, it's limiting self-beliefs that keep getting in the way of what we want to achieve. So when I think about the two most painful times about the whole transition, and there were several, but certainly there was the agonizing period when I was trying to decide, could I really do this, and what would happen if I didn't? And it was what would happen if I didn't that scared the living daylights out of me, because I'm convinced I would have been dead or divorced within 5 years, and probably both, and probably sooner. It was
if you didn't leave Toronto.
If I hadn't left the job in Toronto and everything else, I was in a lifestyle that was going to kill me, and it was definitely going to kill my marriage. And it was one of my great fears. It's interesting. I was interviewed a few days ago by. Just went up live today. Kevin Bulmer interviewed me on his podcast, and I had never thought about it, but he dragged some of the old history out of me. And my parents divorced after 30 years, and I was in my teens. It was a very nasty time, and so that's something I was very much afraid of. I didn't have a lot of fears in life. That was one of them. I did not want to be my father's son in that regard. And so, but then I came down here, and like the dumbass that I was, I spent the first 6 months wandering around feeling sorry for myself. And, going back, I'm looking out the window at the forest in my yard here as we speak, but wandering in the paths behind my house and sitting on a tree, a log, or climbing a tree and just looking around at nature. But I was in such a foul mood. My wife had to remind me to go get showered and shaved. I would put on the same clothes every day. I mean, rubber boots and jeans and a plaid jacket. And she's looking at this city guy that used to wear suit and tie and quarter around town. I'm thinking, but I know now that I was grieving the job that I'd quit.
Yeah.
You see, I quit a job that was going to kill me, but I bought into that bullshit, pardon my language, but that bullshit belief that you could have a career or you could have a lifestyle, but you couldn't have both. Because I'd been pretty much raised to believe that, And so I thought that because I'd walked away from that job, that I had no hope down here in Nova Scotia of ever again recreating something that was anything close to what I had professionally.
Yeah.
I had accepted that I would just make enough money to put food on the table, and that was going to be enough, and it would have been enough. It's what the goal always was.
Yeah.
It took me at least 6 months of in my book, I have the title, I call it, the definition of Homo sapiens is something about being an intelligent being or something. And I said, well, you could have fooled me, because here I was, down here, and the money, that little money that I had was getting spent on things like food and the mortgage, and I was not doing anything. And it still took me, I think, another 3 years after that till finally, eventually with the help of a good mentor, but I think I started to realize that, why the hell did I accept that I couldn't have a really fun, exciting, good-paying job? And so, I mean, that's my message for everybody today. I think 90% of the people that I meet that are struggling and questioning the direction in life, what it really means is down in there somewhere, they know there's something they really want to do, but they just don't believe it's possible. And I don't know how many more times I was thinking, I'm going to interview another guest later this week, and I was thinking, or tomorrow, and I was thinking, one of the questions, because she said she specializes in neuroscience and all this kind of stuff, and as long as I can remember, we've been telling people that our own self-beliefs is one of the single biggest determinants of the outcomes in our life. I mean, it's not like me saying this or you saying this, or it's nothing new, eh? I mean, long before you and I were born and everything else. Why the hell is it that nobody believes it? And the only people that say it are the ones that have achieved, some level of success.
Only a few.
Yeah, small number. So that's the mission. It's a long answer, but when you ask certain questions, you crank passion. So it is about that, and it's particularly about impacting youth, new graduates, recent graduates, and their parents. Because here's the other problem. It's hard for me to say this, but I have said it on a number of. I don't mean to offend, parents of millennials. I have two myself, or parents of kids that are in. I can't even keep track of all the misnomers for generations, but people in their 20s.
Zillennials, I think.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we're people. But here's the thing. Like, they're living in a time of, at least in modern history, of unprecedented change in the job market in particular. Like, within a couple of years, 1 out of every 2 jobs in North America will be in the short-term gig economy. It's just the way it is, eh? So when your kids come to you and say, gee, I mean, I bought into this crap. You told me to go to school, behave, get a degree, or go to college. I got this. If I came out with a trade, I'm great. But if I came out with an arts degree or even a business degree or whatever, I don't have this fabulous job that you promised me. And it's not as much fun if I do have it. And I'm working at Starbucks part-time. No offense to people working at Starbucks. But if you spent 6 years going to university to get a master's degree, you perhaps had something different in mind for the use of the education. And so what we normally do is we go to our parents when we're in circumstances like that. The problem is that 45 and up, and I'm in that category, until I re-educated myself, didn't have a bloody clue of what kind of advice to be giving. The advice we would used to give is that, you got to start at the bottom, you suck it up. The worst advice in the world you can give somebody is to suck it up, especially if they don't even know who they really are and what they really care about and what kind of life they want to live. So I'm just going to reach across there, and what kind of life they want to live. We tell them that you put on your walking shoes, print a bunch of resumes, and go out and see people. And in 2018, the equivalent of that is to sit in front of a computer monitor and send in online applications. I know hardly anybody that actually got a job that way. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
That's true. And I I agree with that. I don't know. And I spent years job hunting before I finally stopped job hunting because it wasn't working, and stopped doing the things that they were telling me to do in order to get a job. I never got even an interview through that way. And every job that I did get through my period of sort of underemployment that I went through for about 5 years before I gave up on getting a job, it came the exact same way that every job I've ever had in the last 25 years did. I researched the companies that I wanted to work for and unsolicited sent them some communication and got in touch with them and said, I hope you're hiring for something because I want to work with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and today, I mean, it's interesting. A number of the guests that I've had on the Screw The Naysayer podcast series speak to that challenge, because I've been asking a lot of people. Dr. Natalia Wyshovsky, who is an amazing personal branding expert, the way she basically says, look, what you have to do is just make yourself so attractive that you actually attract the job you want, or you become so attractive to potential customers in that market that you go ahead and create your own job. The challenge is, and this is where I'm on I'm on my soapbox. It's not really in the book, but I'm using the book as the platform to have this conversation, which kind of gets to the beginnings of the conversation that you put at the beginning. But I'm on my soapbox about the fact that our education system is, to use Don Wettrick's words, the innovation teacher that I have so much respect for, we're still sending our kids to school and telling them to sit down, behave, shut up, and wait for instructions. It's a compliance-based system. And so our best and brightest minds are graduating without a bloody clue as to how they should go about finding their own opportunities.
And we're training them to make the biggest investment of their early lives.
Oh, exactly.
And it's a complete scam. It is so, you do not get what is promised out of it.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, the one thing I always want to say there is if you are specialized, like if your desire is to be a neuroscientist or in neuromedicine or, a nuclear physicist or stuff like that, there are, career paths that require, that level of knowledge and that focus and that intelligence. But I'm hearing over and over and over again. I talked to, it's amusing because my podcast series launched on Tuesday, and I've had almost 1,000 downloads from New Zealand, of all places. And I have interviewed one guest there. He hasn't even been published yet, but I don't know whether it's coincidence or not. But here's a guy, that Rich Rowley, who has ADHD, didn't know it at the time, had a horrible time in high school, barely gets through, somehow gets into the system, becomes a lawyer, I believe, and says, no, that sucks. He quits that, gets a master's degree in computer science somehow. But now he's working for a place called the Mind Lab. And New Zealand's got the most amazing partnership between the school system and this private sector company. And they're putting 40,000 kids a year across New Zealand through these little labs, learning labs that they've set up around the province or the country. And they go in and the kids get all excited because they say, oh, we're going to work on robotics or something. They're all excited.
Yeah, STEM.
They're not learning robotics at all. What they do is they put them in groups, and they have many groups. And they give them problems to solve. And the teachers won't solve the problem for them. They won't give them the answers. So if one group is falling behind another and struggling with something and calls you over, Ms. Horvich, I need help here. I can't figure it out. You're going to look around the room and say, you know what? I noticed that group C over there seems to have figured that out. Why don't you go over there and ask them? So they're teaching collaborative learning. They're teaching them problem solving. These are the things that, I cannot believe that in 2018, we are still having conversations about whether we need to put that kind of curriculum, into. Don Wettrick wrote a book, I forget how many years ago, called The 20%. All he was asking for is that 20% of the time of that mindless repetition of sitting behind a desk when we do nothing be spent on helping people or giving people opportunities to learn, to learn problem skills, to take responsibility, to fail. The other thing that keeps coming up over and over and over again, we have trained and generations, ours included, and you guys are younger than me, and certainly everyone younger than us, the failure is a really bad thing.
Yeah.
Because guess what happens when you come home with a bad report card? Not many of us have pleasant memories of that. Some are a lot worse, some are okay, but it's not fun. You don't get rewarded for it. They don't say, well, not good for trying, So they say,
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I have problems with the whole good for trying approach as well, because I was taught as a child that it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. It's how you play the game, and that you get enjoyment out of it is the most important thing, and that you learn other good skills. And because there was absolutely no competition encouraged and no desire to win anything, I learned around the age of 35, about 10 years ago, I discovered I have never tried to win anything in my life. Yeah. And I have never won anything. I've never accomplished anything very major. I've never, won many prizes. If I did win anything, it was totally by luck, not because I tried. Yeah. And I thought, well, I wonder what would happen if I tried. Yeah. Because I realized that I had this in my head the whole time, that I can try anything and it's totally fine for me to fail. And that gives me the permission to take the easy route.
Yeah. So I'd love to, that's a fabulous insight. And I want to come back to the definition of failure in a second, but the thing that immediately comes to mind, and this was also from I'll call her Dr. Natalia. She talked about that very thing in my interview. Because, she talked about the importance of, when I asked her influences, like, what caused her to have such great insight at a very early stage of her life. I mean, she figured things out much faster than most of us do. She talked about how when she was young, she was a competitive swimmer. And a competitive dancer and a few other things. And she said the things that her parents always told her about that kind of stuff, it's not that you should measure yourself against other people, because that is, if we measure ourselves that way, it can lead to real self-esteem issues. But what she was told is that, look, you put yourself out there. Some days you're going to win because the competition was crap. Some days, you're going to win because you worked really hard and you were just a little bit better than someone. And some days you're going to lose because somebody else was just a little bit better. They're all good. But so I agree with you that I think it's not the same as sort of saying in everything in life that all it counts is, and I think anybody that's really been around sports, you can't tell anybody that they want to spend 5 years of never winning anything. I mean, it doesn't It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. No, it matters. But so when I say failure, what I would get at, it comes down to how we define it. In an academic or a business world, or even in terms of just like finding an opportunity, finding something you might be good at, and people will say all the time, "Well, I don't know what I know I don't like what I'm doing, but I don't know what I want to do." And, I'll say, well, you got to find, get out there. You got to go out there and try the different flavors. So, well, sure. So the first thing is, Gary Vee talks about this. I do disagree with him on one point of it, but he does talk about the need to gather experiences, and get out there and do that. I don't like that he's telling everybody to just sort of, don't worry about it. If you don't figure it out till you're 28 or 30, that's great. You're only a 30 your way through your life. Because in my experience, by the time you're 30, if you're not starting to sort out some of those social things, you're going to pay both an economic and a social consequence for that. I mean, people that are trying to have relationships or have families, or, you can't think about even getting married and having kids if for people who want to go down that path. If you don't have some stability in what you're doing in your life, you're still trying to figure those things out. So I think everybody's different, but I do think that the 20s is not a decade to be just sort of tossed away. But by failure, it's more that in the work environment, it's about challenging conventional wisdom. So it's always been done this way, but I might be able to do it this way. And if I could, something really good would happen. So there's not really what is the downside of me trying that? Well, if I'm going to be physically endangered, if I have to step in front of a train to try it or something, well, I guess I should not do that. But if I'm not, physically at risk or something here, or going to have to spend $1 million, where's the harm? But because we've just drilled this thing into people that failure is bad, bad, bad. I mean, I know, I do mention it in my book. I mean, we are conditioning people to just see failure as something that results in pain. Or work without pay. Yes. As exactly. Bad.
The other thing is that gaining life experiences without getting paid is something nobody should do. Nobody should work for free. It's terrible to put yourself out there and not get paid for it. But I found the exact opposite experience.
Yeah. So I think it depends a lot on the. There is a part of me that doesn't like the whole internship thing, because let's face it, I mean, in North America here, we have exported most of our entry-level jobs. So we exported the entry-level jobs out of the country, and the new entry-level job for a lot of big corporations is unpaid internships. So if it's truly going to create that learning experience that leads to, the employment and all those kind of things. But, again, I was talking to a mother whose son is will be finishing 4 years of university, a very expensive university, to become a dietitian. In order to be able to work in the field, he's going to have to go work for 12 months for free somewhere, pay his room and board and living expenses. To learn and think, well,
for free, which
didn't you just do that for the last 4 years?
That makes no sense to me. That makes no sense to me.
But try things.
My experience was almost 25 years ago when I graduated from college in Toronto, and I had a 6-week unpaid internship. 6 weeks. I just tacked it on to the end of my. Yeah. To the end of my spring semester. I'm like, it's an extra 6 weeks that I'm in school.
Yeah. Big fan.
And it was I hated it. I hated the idea of working for no pay. I hated having to work full time. I hated having to be on the 9 to 5 schedule, because it was the first time in my life, and it was really freaking hard just to wake up early and be at work on time. Yeah. But it gave me so many of those basic fundamental things in a corporate environment for a company that, over the years, the people that I worked with in that office, I was working for 680 News in the retail sales department, retail department. It's a local Toronto radio station, but it's owned by Rogers. Yes. And so Gary, who was my sales manager, and I was just an intern for 6 weeks there, so I was nothing to him, but he was the manager. And over the years, in the 25 years since I've done that internship, he's become one of the highest, most influential people at the Rogers Corporation. Sure. And throughout the years, we've worked together so many times, and our interactions are so much more positive. Yeah. I get so many more gigs just fall in my lap, referrals and jobs that I barely even have to work for, because I went to that 6-week internship and people didn't hate me. And I didn't make their business fail. Yeah. And I showed up every day, and I was sort of polite. Yeah. Even though there was no reason for them to have paid me, because looking back now, what I contributed to them was absolutely no value whatsoever. Yeah. It was all value for me to take on that internship. And so I'm I really want people to embrace the right internships. Yeah,
no, exactly. But, and those things, and in my experience, at least in Canada, the community colleges are doing a great job of that. They do 6-8 week work terms. But when I look at, I won't name an individual corporation, but when I look at some of the biggest companies and the corporations in the entire country, and they're trying to say that they're doing social good by getting somebody to work for them for 6 months. Yeah, the social good would be bring them in for 8 weeks, not pay them, or 6, but give them real context and all those kind of things. So, we're digressing a bit, but but the thing is that's not even a Band-Aid on the problem, because what we have to do, and this is what I'm just going to, for as long as this brand keeps going, is just create an ability in people. We've got to teach an entrepreneurial mindset to people that don't know what that is. We have to teach them to challenge conventional wisdom. We have to teach them how to create their own opportunities. We have to teach them that. I don't encourage big failures, but to try things, test ideas.
Do you think the indication for you, for everyone, is to get a side hustle?
Well, yeah. There's one I have real big, mixed feelings for, because that's really popular today. My answer is I can only answer one way, and it's just based on my own life experience. There's a chapter in my book called, Why Backup Plans Suck. And I think that the challenge with a lot of these side hustles is about finding a way to make money. And usually, how could I make some money on the side? And I'm not saying that's bad. If you're underpaid and all that, good, you're learning entrepreneurial skills.
But isn't that the fundamental of entrepreneurship as well? If you're teaching entrepreneurship skills, it's how to be self-sustainable without an employer.
But there you go though. But Debbie, I'm not alone. I mean, there's so many of us that achieve success. Learned what we had to learn in order to beat the system and make money, or we think we're beating the system. But there's a reason why the business coaching and the life coaching market has completely exploded in North America and probably around the world, because there's a boatload of people who, wake up in their 30s and they're absolutely miserable. One of my guests, Kevin Boehmer put it this way. He said, if you start doing all that stuff before you figure out who you are, what's really important to you, and it's really going to take in order for you to be happy, what kind of work you want to do. So what I'm preaching to people is, and this is hard for most people to believe is possible, but I'm preaching that we need to build our career around our life, around the life we want. So figure out the life you want, and then figure out so if you've done the first part and you really figured it all out, then the other thing is that in my experience, when you get to game-changing situations, like something that could totally change your life. I had many of them. 4 years after I started my business down here, I was still just making a living. We were living paycheck to paycheck. I was meeting my goals and objectives. And I'd started to work with a partnership with another company. And I woke up one day and I said, something's got to change here. I'm spending 75% of my time on this new partnership and I got no money out of it. And I think a lot of people would have gone back to what I'd been doing before. But I looked at it and I said, the other stuff isn't going to give me any more than what I've already got. I've figured out what I can get from what I'm doing right now, and it's not going to take this business to the next level. So I actually ditched everything I'd been doing, the only stuff that was making me any money, and put 100% of my effort into that other thing. And that's the product that we went on to sell over $10 million worth of product on. So I think the having your back against the wall thing is hard when you're just doing side hustles. And I love side hustles, but I want you to figure out the side hustle after you figure out what kind of life you want and where it fits in, your thing. That's me anyway. Those are the people that I gravitate to. I can't.
How do you figure out the life that you want without having the experience? Well, and the business generally is to provide the life or the lifestyle.
There's where you start. So I think the two things that you do is, there's a lot more than that. The place I would start is I'd want to make sure I know what my core values are. The things that in my life are just non-negotiable. I don't have to explain them to anybody. Like in my case, I valued my family. So there was no amount of money that my employer could have paid me, and he tried. He kept giving me raises
that
to
would get you to stay in Toronto.
Couldn't have made. You need to figure those out, and there's pretty easy exercises. There's a video that I give away for anybody who downloads the book right now. I'm giving away a video that actually talks about that can I show that? I mean,
yes, please do, and please tell them the website address. I've just finished building the website.
Yeah. So it's www.screwthenaysayers.com, and as we speak, you can get the ebook version of that for free. And when you do, you're actually going to. The easiest way is just to wait for it. It'll come by email. You can see it right away, but you get it by email once, so you can relax. And there's a video that has an exercise in there that is just my thank you. And so that's an exercise it changed my life, and I've used with hundreds of people and in workshops. So you start there, and then you start with the lifestyle. So you say, well, if you were to be self-employed, what, and again, you just sort of make a list of the things that you want and don't want. If, being a millionaire by the time you're 30 is your goal and you really, really feel that, go for it. I can't relate, but it doesn't mean you're wrong. Like, nobody can tell you what your goals are.
Well, but you're also, what you're saying is make the decision, but like always, it's not written in stone. You're not married to the decision. You always go out there and get the information. Like what I thought I knew a few years ago, hell, I did not know what I was doing. I thought I knew for sure what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Which is all fine. It's as long as there's purpose and purpose to the purpose to your to your direction, and as long as you don't allow yourself to get offside with one of your core values.
I think that that's really true. I think for me, the side hustle that I started in 2004, I was about 8 years into my advertising agency career as a media buyer. And I started teaching private yoga instruction. I took a month off from my career and had to quit my job and get a new job after the yoga teacher training. But I started my side hustle as a private yoga instructor on top of my 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
And that the purpose of that was to show me, along with making a little bit of extra side money, was to show me how to do small business marketing and promotions with no risk. Because if I didn't get any clients, if I spent, $500 in a month, because I was working a full-time job, because I'd been in my career for a few years, I had what I felt like was lots of extra money and lots of security to waste on my business and to just really try things. And I mean, I didn't stay as a yoga instructor. I love it. And I still practice yoga, or at least again, now I practice quite a bit, but it was one of those things that just creating that business that I could work when I wanted, with who I wanted. I could make the offers that I wanted. I could change my pricing. I could change my packages. I could, do whatever I wanted. Opened up my mind to the potential that, like you had been sold the belief that, have the lifestyle and the career and everything will be perfect for you. I had been given the belief, installed the belief in myself that the most important thing, that my value comes from my employer.
Yeah.
That me having a job gives me stability and gives me the right to live in this society and to have something to say to people. And I have money to spend, and that gives me a position in society. And then when I didn't have that, and everyone was telling me, you have to go get a job, Debbie, you have to go get a job. And I thought, oh my God, who am I? I'm nobody.
Do you know why? Do you know why you felt so bad? And it's really interesting because this is a subject I've researched a lot over the years. And so here's the thing: the way we you know this, but the way we experience happiness over the years changes.
Oh yeah.
And up until our early 20s, or presuming we went the university or college route, I mean, our purpose in life has been laid out for us. It's to go to high school, go to high school, get good grades, do some volunteer, get into a good college program, and get a job. And when we first start, when people are asking us what we want to do, we didn't have a clue. So we just sort of absorbed the problem. The real issue is that the people around us form perceptions about what we should be doing, what we're capable of. So if we try and if they think we have the potential to be a doctor, and we say we want to be a dog walker, we've got a very big problem. If they think we're cut out to be a plumber, and we say we want to be a doctor, we have an equally big problem. You get all this resistance around you. So most of us are just fairly pliable, and so we'll take on whatever and people are doing.
We're looking for the easy route, less resistance,
of course, because we always do. But and it's not that people are trying to be unfair, but the thing is that the transition that all the way through our teen years, happiness is for the most part. We could go a lot of directions with this word, but it's experience. It's we try things, and this is pleasant. I'd like to do more of that. It is just life. I mean, I'm not trying to make light of it, but what happens when we get into our 20s is that external validation becomes really important to us. It's been important increasingly because when we graduated from high school, people said, "You did a good job, Debbie." And you said, "Well, that's
the start of it."
And then we get into university, and oh, great, you got into the university you wanted to. Congratulations, they pat you on the back. Yeah. Then we graduate. It's supposed to be our day. It's not about us. It's about them feeling great about convincing us to go and get through it. But then when we get a job, even if the job sucks, even if we hate it, people tell us that, oh, you should be so proud. Good for you. You just stick it out. everybody has to start at the bottom.
Being a martyr is a good position.
Well, but when they tell us that we're doing good and we're not so certain that we aren't doing good, we accept it. Mm-hmm. Employers know this. Why do you think employers do all these wonderful things like have fancy job titles?
I was just going to say, a job title with no pay raise. Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine a few years ago who had been promoted to VP. And I'm like, did you get a pay raise with that? She's like, no. That was no promotion at all. They're just trying to get you not to quit.
In my case, it was certainly the money, was there, it was big. But, there was it was crazy. There was the President's Club. If you achieved 115% of your quota. I mean, in 1987, Debbie and I went to, my wife, Debbie, and we went to Hong Kong and into China. Like, it was very rare for Westerners to go anywhere in China in 1987. Hong Kong was still part of the British Empire in those days. This thing was completely paid with 40 or 50 other couples from around the world. They treated us like we were royalty, But you know what? You come back and you say, well, I'm sure as hell not missing that trip next year. So I remember, not a word of a lie, our fiscal year end, it was October 31st. So that's for those that practice the Halloween tradition. When you have young children, that's an important night. My son was four, just turning 5. I remember, 4. I remember being the only one still left in the office at 9:00 at night, hoping, because I was in Toronto, hoping that somebody from the West Coast would phone through or fax through one last order, because I was 2% short. I had achieved 113% of my quota. I had made about $135,000 in 1987. Not exactly chump change. I could have taken my family on a vacation anywhere in the world that we wanted to go. And I remember turning off that light, walking out the door, feeling like a complete and total failure. Now, the reason I was a failure that night is because I was not home to take my son out on the trick-or-treating. But your whole, when you get caught up in these systems, your whole perception, and that's a lot of what I talk about in the book. You've got to be very self-aware, because money is great. I love money. People say, don't get the wrong impression. I like money. I don't love it. I like it, and I like it a lot. I get to do a lot of nice things with it. But, it makes a very nice servant. I don't want to be a slave to money. Somebody said that. I can't remember who I'm stealing it. But what happens when we get into our 20s and we start chasing career progression and promotions and all that kind of stuff and more money is that before we know it, we're chasing goals that other people set for us.
Yeah.
In order to get that promotion, you need to do this. So I'm going to go do this.
My whole career, I never made a choice for myself. And I was lucky. I thought I was really lucky, because every promotion, every job, I was recruited away from my current employer. I never had to job hunt. I mean, my interviews, they would take me out for breakfast and offer me a job at the end of it. I'm like, I didn't even have to interview. I don't even have to try. They're like, nope. Yeah. But I was cutting myself short so badly, because what I wanted was the acceptance and the permission to move forward in my career.
That's it. And so, I mean, I think I didn't set out to do it, but in the writing process, the book ended up being a lot about understanding these kind of systems, helping people to just in a fun way. I think it's funny. It's certainly sarcastic at times, but I'm just trying to get people thinking about and understanding the systems that have been put in place to get us locked in. And you and I both know people that are 50 years old and are still judging their happiness based on external validation.
Oh, I mean, I know so many people who do it for their entire lives.
Exactly.
And they're usually employees.
Yes, of course. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, but the key here is that the moment you let go of the need for external validation, the moment you accept, much as hopefully you love mom and dad, brother, sister, friends, or whatever, hopefully you've got those good relationships. But the moment you accept that when it comes down to what you really, really want in life, there's only one opinion that counts, and that's yours. And when you believe that, it's the empowerment that seeps through your body. It's like meditating at the end. I don't do yoga, but I meditate. It's like that moment in time when all of a sudden everything just flows, and you just, and that's what happens. But and so the irony of all these challenges people in their 20s are facing right now, because those jobs aren't there, they could choose to think they're victims, that, that we've screwed them over, and to a degree we have. We lied to them and they're in debt, and it's a shame they're in debt.
But they have such a great opportunity that we
insane.
have never had.
It's insane. It will only be achieved by those that push by the limiting self-beliefs, and by those that stop listening lovingly. I can still love you and not listen to you when you tell me what you think I should do. I'm not telling people to ditch. You should get rid of people in your life that are pulling you back. But I don't advocate getting rid of mom and dad and all this kind of stuff. I mean, we have family, and I'm a believer in it. But at least in most circumstances. But it's getting that across, and it's about talking about how, you can find opportunities. And there's actually, because you're being forced to look at these things earlier, like I left at 31, and I was, for my generation, very early on in figuring that stuff out. I'm talking to people today that are 21 years old who have figured it out. And I give them a big high five, and they say, then I don't mind if you go out and experiment, gather experiences. Gary's 100% right. But for those of you that haven't figured that out yet, you need to be slapped or something to make you realize that you've been brainwashed. And I know, and that getting rid of 30 years or 35 years of prior brainwashing.
Man, it takes time. It takes work. That's the hard work of being in psychotherapy.
And it's that self-awareness that and then of course the natural tendency is to just beat the shit out of ourselves for making bad decisions, which is really dumb, because every one of us, when we get up in the morning, I'm going to just say this because we're friends. Like, you and I had a moment last week when we didn't have a good day together. We were communicating through messages and everything. It wasn't a good day. But I sat down there afterwards, and I was talking to my wife about it, but I said, here's the thing. I know for sure that when Debbie got up yesterday morning, she didn't say, gee, I think I'd like to screw up Tim's afternoon. And I know for sure that I didn't get up intending to screw up your day. But somehow these things happen. So the reason I'm sharing this is I think we all would do well to remember that every person in this world gets up in the morning intending to do their best. And sometimes we get sidetracked. Most often it's just communication, but sometimes we get sidetracked. Sometimes we, something happens around us. Sometimes somebody pulls us down and we get in a foul mood and we take it out on somebody else. There's a million, reasons for it. Projecting fears. But never, ever, ever believe that somebody's done something that, that annoys you. I'm not saying don't defend yourself, but don't give yourself that much ego to believe that they're doing it because they got up deciding to get you. Because we're just not that important to anybody. No. I'm not Gary Vee. Nobody wants to get it to me today or. Yeah,
it's true. And I think that sense that people really care, that it really matters what choice you make and what direction you go and what clothes you wear, that people really care about anything that you do, whether you succeed or fail or make mistakes or lie or get thrown in jail or win the lottery. I mean, maybe if you win the lottery, but other than that, most people generally, they're focused on themselves and their own lives. And what I see is a lot of people really being afraid of making a mistake and it being a terminal thing that everyone will see it and it lives online forever. And I'm like, but it's still a good thing. There's still a silver lining to every screw up.
Yeah, the silver lining comes from your book, and the naysayers is what came to my mind. I mean, that's what naysayers love, eh? I mean, every time you mess up, they get the gloat. And,
they love it, but it's still, it pushes you forward. There's always, I went through a terrible bullying experience. I mean, it wasn't so terrible for me, but it was really a very public humiliation of a large group of influencers on Google Plus. Who were bullying me on a live stream that I did on Forbes.
Okay.
And they maxed out the comment thread. There were 500 comments of what a failure I was during the live stream on Forbes. And I'm telling you, I had given every one of those influencers the opportunity to live stream with me on Forbes. Yeah. And they had turned me down and then came onto the live stream and were talking behind my back as I'm live streaming. But the crazy thing that happened, and I knew in my mind, I was proud of the work that I had done. None of what they were saying had any truth to it. I looked through all of the comments for any learning that, you know, if anyone was giving me valuable feedback that I could use or apply. Like, you know, I look so stupid and my career is failing. There's not much I can do about that. Thanks for your opinion.
Exactly, yeah.
But because the comments got maxed out, because it was so public, like some of the bullies were even putting threads to the comment threads on my public Facebook page.
Oh,
like I posted on my Facebook page about how people were commenting, not very nice. And one of the bullies came onto my Facebook page and posted the link so that every one of my friends and family would see them bullying me.
Yeah. You see, that's
and I'm like,
that's the most
okay. But what he did when he did that, yes, it sort of impacted me a little bit, but not that much, because I knew I didn't really do anything wrong. I'm not responsible for them. They're just being idiots. But the other thing was, because they did it so publicly, I had some very, very big name people reach out to me privately and compliment me how I was dealing with the bullying. And it was an excellent example of how you respond when you go, you know, when the social media avalanche comes.
Yeah. You just got, I mean, it is hard. I mean, it's fair. And that's such an extreme example, but, you know, let's be honest, you know, people that want to spend their time, you know, bashing, you know, other people are not anyone in particular that I'd want to hang around with. In my experience, the more successful people are in life, the nicer they are. It's certainly been my experience in this podcast, you know, series. Like I've, you know, they wait. You can't, as a rookie, immediately go after big names because, you know, there's a million people starting podcasts every day. But I've got enough, even in this short time, I've interviewed 12, 14 people, something like that, 5 are up. I've talked to enough growing names that people are realizing, well, he's at least serious. He's taking his craft, you know, seriously. He's got the right equipment. He's trying it and all that kind of stuff. And it's giving me courage to up, you know, the game into I'm reaching out to. And I'm getting mentoring from some people that have no particular vested interest in doing it. They just want to help.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. I mean, so, you know, for sure, that's the other theme on this whole thing. Naysayers, that's why I say naysayers travel in packs. And so we need to find ways. One of the beauties of the technology we have worldwide is that we can travel in packs too. So we just need to, you know, gather around. But what we have to do is really choose our words carefully. I think there's to criticize somebody online, even if you're 100% convinced they're wrong, unless you're absolutely convinced that you're helping them in some way, keep your mouth shut. You are not contributing anything of value to the dialogue. Move on, you know. Anyway, this time passed very fast.
Yeah, that happens. Now, the good thing is, because this is a video interview, both podcast and Sparkle SOS book authors and publishers usually goes straight from Google Plus Hangouts on Air to YouTube on video. So I actually was thinking while we were speaking that the first half of this conversation can be the podcast. And Perfect. The entire thing will go on to YouTube as my Sparkle SOS Book Authors and Publishers episode. If you still have a few extra minutes to go through some of the questions. I'm not in
any rush at all. I was
Okay, because I still want to give the audience, like you really went through, I think, a big and a great experience, an example experience for the audience with writing your book and developing the brand and creating the podcast, and you got the website up. So I want to go through some of these questions so that the audience has you as a guide to go, oh, okay, maybe that's the decision that I want to make, or just to give them stuff to think about.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about your book. And you went with the self-publishing route. If in the audience, if you're not aware, there's really only 2 ways to get a book published, which is traditionally published. One of the big traditional publishing agencies or publishers will publish you in the traditional way. Or the other option is to self-publish and work with someone like me. I'm a fairy godmother. I am a book publisher. I do have an imprint. I published Tim's book for him. But everyone who is not a traditional publisher who works like the traditional publishers is a self-publisher. So in essence, Tim chose the self-publishing route, and his decision was to also work with someone like myself to help make the decisions easier. So let's talk about that decision that you made to self-publish, and how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, well, I mean, to a certain degree, for most of us, the decision gets made for us anyway, because it is very hard in the nonfiction market, unless you have a very big visible name to attract a major imprint. Having said that, I did have a couple conversations with some local publishers, and I got some names of a couple organizations that there was an indication that they would probably be interested in picking the book up. The challenge I had with it is twofold. I don't want anybody to have illusions that they're going to make a lot of money publishing a book, whether it's self-published or through somebody else. The reality is that you just don't. It's part
not from the book.
Not from the book. Oh, you can make a lot of money, but the book is the platform that you build on. So the challenge with the traditional public marketplaces is it's a very laborious and time-consuming process. And I'm an entrepreneur. I struggled for 2.5 years to get the damn thing written. Once I was finally pretty much convinced, that I had a good enough core, I went and I hired an editor that I respected a lot, and had him go through it and read it and offer objective opinions. And I took most of the advice as I usually do with editors. And I changed it. So there I was sitting there with what not finished in the sense that it's not ready to be sent off to Amazon or whatever, but the writing's done. And that was 2.5 years of very tough self-reflection and trying to find my voice. The book has two voices to it. It's my own story, and then the story of what's happening in people's lives today type of thing, third party and first. And so it was hard to get that flow and everything, eh? So I wanted the damn thing to be published, and going the traditional route would have taken forever. The other thing
it would have taken a lot longer, but you also, part of what takes so long is making the changes that they insist you make on your book.
Yeah,
you give up so much control, and you went through that 2-year process. It was a hard-won victory for you at the end.
Absolutely.
It was worth the effort, because you actually got your voice out rather than publishing what the publisher wants.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the other thing for sure is that when you have control over your own book, your own content, people, it would be naive to think that a publisher, even if I managed to convince somebody to help me, that they would do much to help me sell it. I'm going to have to sell the brand anyway. So if I have to sell a brand myself, why the hell not own the brand?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. So that was the first part of it. As to, you didn't sort of expressly ask it, but you talked about me coming to you. I mean, the problem was that you get to this stage, and I think the exact words that I might have used when I tracked you down. Nice to have customers chasing you, Debbie.
Yes.
I hope I got the discount on that.
Very nice to have been found by you.
But so here's the thing. When you get close, there's so many moving parts. It's not that there was nothing there that you don't have to be a brain surgeon to figure any of it out. But there's so many moving parts, and my head was spinning, and I was also trying to, by that stage, I was also trying to figure out, well, how am I going to launch a podcast and what technology I can do, on the video here. This is believe it or not, took a lot of time figuring out what microphone to get for my Mac platform and all of this kind of stuff, and what recording software to use, and how to, try and avoid disasters and all of those kind of things. So, I was so overwhelmed, to be honest, and it was going to cost me more money to wait than it was to get out and just have somebody take care of it. And so that's why, in terms of especially the logistics on the book and getting it up and dealing with with Amazon and the Create Space, which is where they print them, and so that we can now have them, and I've got a bunch of them on the way to me now, so I'll have for book signings and stuff, and it just took a lot of pressure off. I just pushed it off to the side, and I got onto the podcast. So,
and I think I might have described it to you at one point. I try to be as if you had duplicated yourself and sent yourself and given yourself the time to go through and spend the last 5 years learning everything about book publishing. Yeah. That's what I try to be for you, is the person, your duplicate who's expressing for you. But because that's exactly what it took me. I fell into book publishing by accident because I was looking for how are all of these social media superstars getting their books published and suddenly ending up on stage all over the place, and they're the social media consultant that everybody wants to work with. Right. And I wanted to build a name for myself, and I'm like, how are they all getting publishing contracts? So I started interviewing people. Sparkle SOS Book Authors and Publishers was a show that I started in 2012.
Wow.
Interviewing book authors. And it was in 2012 that I discovered on my first episode of the show that half the people on my show, more than half the people on my show, were publishers, and they were self-publishers. And I went,
of course,
oh, what? And it took me, it was 8 months before I published a dummy book to Amazon.
It's I get what you're saying, because I consider myself to be highly educated. I've run a pretty complex business. I've navigated some difficult waters, but I'm not saying I couldn't have figured it out. But I can guarantee you I didn't want to figure it out.
And anybody can, and that's the message. Is people come to me looking to me for help, but I don't need to help them. The only people that I work with are my paying clients, because all of the information is out there. I spent a lot of money on training courses, and people are like, why don't you have a training course to teach people how to do what you're doing for them so that they can do it on their own? I'm like, because that's not the business that I'm in. The business that I'm in is actually doing it for people. And if I wanted to teach it, I don't want to teach it, because what I don't want to do is copy somebody else's teaching.
Yeah.
And I've invested a lot of money in really good training over the years from some of the biggest and best names in the industry. So why would we change it at that point? So let me ask you about the writing process specifically. Where did you find your inspiration for the topic, for the book cover, for the title? What was that process like for you?
Yeah, so I think we talked a lot about the inspiration, sort of at the beginning about, sharing the...
But like the moment where you went,
Well, I'm a different kind of writer. If I showed you how many words that I'd actually written down, using fingers to keyboard, it'd be a couple 100,000. Mm. And as you know, the book, I don't know, is 20,000? I don't know. Yeah. Not a lot. It's 127 pages, folks. It's a very light, easy read. But I just started, thinking about the things that were bugging me, thinking about where were the lessons in there? How could I turn it into a story? Thinking about, there's a whole chapter in there called, what are naysayers? And I give all sorts of different examples of them. You wouldn't believe how many iterations of that, and then I went through phases when I thought maybe I even contemplated publishing an Instagram book just based on, Screw the Naysayers with like one-line chapters, and I tried actually, I just, that was all the struggle to get the voice and be able to, to tell it. So, and I think, I do think that the naysayer theme emerged fairly early on in the process. The title, maybe not until a little later on, certainly by the halfway point, I knew I wanted to call it Screw the Naysayers. And it's interesting. I looked around and there's a song that somebody wrote 10 or 20 years ago called Screw the Naysayers. There's no podcast that has the name up until now. I couldn't really find books. You find episodes and chapters and everything, but, so it just sort of fit. And then as time went on, I added the tag, They Suck Anyways, because really when I finally found my voice, I realized that I just wanted to confront head on. Full disclosure, there's a little bit of language in the book, nothing like a Gary V podcast, but it's there. It's there, because I think it fits the moment, not to shock or offend, or any of those kind of things. But I just don't have time for people like you described with your experience there online. I just don't have time for folks that are wanting to tear people down. I don't have time for I'm furious about the way we refer to, when I keep seeing these articles about millennials and others being entitled, spoiled brats. I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, we're the ones who told them exactly what they should do and how to behave and to wait for instructions and to go to school and university, and all they had to do was do that and the job would be there. And when they don't get the job we promised them, we call them entitled.
They are, but
not
we make them that way.
They're entitled perhaps in other ways, but they're not entitled I think when it comes to this whole idea of what they should be doing in life, it's not their bloody fault that we didn't teach them how to really figure out. We never asked them to define what success was going to mean to them. We never asked them to in fact, we told them. We didn't. Yeah, not only did we not ask, we told them, and we drilled it into their head like crazy. So, the inspiration started to evolve to wanting to somehow impact that dialogue, and it's going to be interesting to see where the book goes. It may go directly to the source, which is the 20s and the 20-somethings that I'd love to really get engaged in this, because they're the people I love working with the most. But it's possible that the path to them might be through the parents, by making the parents feel guilty for being such bloody idiots, and opening them up,
or just wanting to do better now.
Well, exactly. Exactly. I use we as a society, we've screwed up. Like it doesn't matter. It's everybody.
Everybody participates in it. Yeah,
exactly. So that was writing, and it finally came together. I think because when I finally got the courage to share a bit of it, and I got enough feedback back from people that I really didn't know, very, very casual acquaintances that said, this is pretty good.
How far along were you when you started sharing it with people? That's a really key point, that you shared it before you published.
Oh, I know I did. I would say at least 3 months before you and I spoke. So, we're talking 5 or 6 months before the book, came out. Is when I did two things. But
you were completely finished the manuscript when you showed it to people.
The manuscript, by the time you saw it, had been finished and edited, and didn't mean there wouldn't be the last little thing.
But by the time you started showing it to people, it was completely edited?
No, nowhere close. But it was, I did two things. I mean, in a finished copy, I shared it with one person that I'd been introduced to that felt safe enough. He didn't know me, and yet I knew he had background and experience. And the other place I shared it, this took some guts on my part, because a young woman in our local community has a business called Waves of Confetti, but she's a very artistic person, and she was hosting a poetry slam, and so people are going in and reading their poetry, and I took some of the verses from my which is not really classic poetry, but there's portions of it that's close, So I took a few of those chapters, and I asked her if it would be okay. And she said, yeah, come on in. And so there's this 60-year-old standing up in front of, 16 to 23-year-olds, reading. And, they don't clap at poetry slams, but they snap their, yeah, exactly. I got a lot of snaps. So I said, I must be doing so. And, it's, I think it inspired me to finish one of the things I put in the book is, I think the single biggest gift, other than our love, the single biggest gift that we can give to anybody who's trying to create something from nothing. So whether it's a book, whether it's a new business, whether it's a painting, a dance, it doesn't matter what it is. The single biggest gift we can give them is just our belief in their ability, and just tell them, what, that's good. People that feel energy from being negative, good on you, man. I mean, you're going to be the guy. If you make it, you're going to be the one in the, Gary Vee talks about telling young people to go to senior citizens homes these days, so you can go around and see all the people that are realizing that they're filled with regret about the life they lived.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are going to be sitting there saying, oh, what an asshole I was. And yeah. I had a chance to lift this person up, or I could have just kept my mouth shut, but I did something bad. And
really a huge thing to keep in mind is that the naysayers actually have no impact whatsoever. No negative impact that I've ever noticed in my life, other than when you
allow it.
Yeah, so exactly. It's all how you allow them to impact you. They're always going to exist.
Yeah.
But recognizing that I'm going to launch this thing, this book, this project, a movie, a new business, whatever it happens to be. I know that people are going to call me crazy. I know people are going to say my idea is stupid. I know they're going to say it's never going to work. I know I'm going to get the stink eye from my in-laws at the holidays. I'm going to, probably have my friends laughing at me because I've got the night sweats over can I pay salaries or not. But the fact of the matter is what people say makes absolutely no impact on you and your actions and the results that come out of it. So if you just keep on taking action, it's impossible for you not to improve. It's impossible if you're trying for you not to learn from the failures and to learn from the winning.
But there's an edge to your voice here. I'm just going to psychoanalyze for a minute here. What I would say with the more gray hair over here, I agree with everything you said.
I color.
But well, there you go. But you're still much younger. But here's the thing, Debbie. Don't try and be too tough. It is important that we surround ourselves by. It doesn't have to be a huge number. Surround's not the right word. It is important that we have people in our life who provide that positive energy. That when we're having not the greatest of day, or when, because one of the many problems with naysayers, but I mean, the human mind's a very tricky thing. And if 5 people tell you that you're an idiot and you're going to fail, even if all 5 people know nothing about don't know, have a clue what they're talking about.
You're going to wonder if they're right.
Well, it starts to feel like there's 50 people that just told you, you see. But the beautiful thing is that one person that tells you that, hey, I think you're awesome. And I think you're going to be fine. I think it's going to work out. That can overpower 1,000 of those. So I do think it's important that we try and exclude people from our lives, not in-laws, but we exclude people from our lives that are overly negative. There's a difference between being negative and not understanding. I've had this my entire life running a business. Like, imagine in 1988 saying I live in a community where the men work as lobster fishermen and carpenters and in the forest and construction and all those kind of things. But these hands, not meant for construction or something like that. But I was trying to tell people I was running an educational software company before the world of the internet. Mm-hmm. People looked at me like I had 9 heads. It's not that they really had an opinion one way or the other, at least not around here, but they had no idea. Here I am at age 60, I'm doing it all over again. Because for my age group, when I was out at a social gathering a couple of weeks ago. Oh, what are you doing, Tim? You're pretty much retired. I'm thinking, I'm working about 7 days a week these days right now. I'm hoping not
working harder than ever.
And they say, well, what are you doing? And I think, I don't even know where to begin. Because I don't know how to explain to you what you have to do to start a podcast if you're going to be really serious about it, if you're going to try and monetize it. I don't know how to talk to you if you say that your goal is really to affect change, around the world. And you really are bold enough to think that you can do that, that there's no reason because others have. It's not that I want to sound arrogant to them, but I just don't know how to explain because they don't get it. And what are you selling? Well, right now, I'm not really selling anything. I mean, I'm giving the book away for now. I will sell it, but it's a platform for the podcast to get the word out. And somewhere down the line, I'm going to figure it out. I'm just worried about, I don't have a clue what I'm going to be doing in 6 months, except I know I'll be in front of a microphone talking to people.
Interesting.
And I'm just trusting.
Yeah.
It'll work out.
Yeah. I mean, certainly there's, that you are very well aware of your opportunities to generate business. But you're making the choice to have the focus on creating the platform, which is a long-term vision and a long-term investment.
You have to play the long-term game in this. My advice to anybody that's thinking about a podcast, first of all, I mean, if you want to do it as a hobby, that's fine. But if you've got aspirations of it becoming something meaningful to your business, then you better be all in. And I'm loving it. The most enjoyable times are when I'm interviewing people, but it's a lot of work. And
it is so exhausting.
And the learning curve is especially if you're not as familiar with the technology as was my case, it's not short. So, and
you're investing money.
You are, in my case, because I'm 60, I don't exactly have all day to get this thing going. So I'm investing fairly substantial amounts of money. There's a reason why there's been over 4,000 downloads of my podcast in 3 days. And it's not because I was the best name, the well-known name in the world, I've reached out to people that have social media capacities that in return for compensation are willing to help, and very fairly so, like, at probably much less than they should be charging me, because they're sort of buying into the argument, but it isn't free. And you do lose a little sleep at night when you realize that it's, I'm still pre-revenue and I keep writing checks. And I'm playing with my retirement money. I don't have to worry about eating tomorrow, but I might in 10 years if I don't, but it's not in my nature to think 10 years out.
But you don't know, you don't have a clear plan for 6 months, but you do have probably a handful of options. Like three or four potential outcomes are going to happen over the next 6 months for you that will be generated.
I know that if I can get to 50 to 100,000 downloads a month, that I will monetize that podcast in a way that at least cover the expenses and get me some money back. I'm embarking on some discussions that are really in the infancy around strategic partnerships with organizations that may share my values, like may want to affect change for young people, or anybody that's really serves a client that has facing some sort of barrier to getting the kind of job they want, where they're going to have to probably go out and make their own job. It could be immigrants. It could be people with, disabilities. It could be just people that are challenged with helping youth. Any organizations like that share that. Those are the people that I embrace. And in that environment, I got a lot of different ideas about how we could work. But I've had to focus on, and I'm still going to be focused on for the next little bit, getting the podcast so it becomes the best that it can possibly be. And I'm still screwing up, and I'm still sometimes talking too much. I had only one of 12 or 13 that I interviewed, but this little cord on the mic came loose and I didn't realize it. So unfortunately, I went through a whole episode and I had to go back to the person and say, I got you, but I don't have me.
Oh,
and
my
it's
God.
Really almost impossible. Now, she said, yes, I'll re-record, but I haven't.
Of course.
But I haven't talked to her since. She doesn't do it. So I mean,
it's funny. I'll share with you. I about a year and a half after I turned Gary Vee down for a job interview, I had the opportunity to interview him in a one-a-day Q&A thing that he was doing, and he was phoning me at a certain time and day. And I had to figure out how to record it, but I'd never done it like that before. I always did Hangouts on air. And I will tell you that is my lost Gary Vee interview.
Oh my!
Because I only have me.
Yeah.
I don't even have him. If I had at least gotten his side of the interview, I could re-record myself. I could do some fancy stuff and get it back, but there was no recreating his answers.
Oh, shit. Yeah, it hurts. Oh, well.
Okay, so let's talk about how far do you have your podcast interviews booked for right now?
Yeah.
How far in the future?
I would say probably I've got about, including ones that are either recorded or booked, I'm probably 2 months out, maybe. People are telling me, I was talking to one of the most successful podcasters in the world, surprisingly, the other day by Skype, and he tries to keep about 2 months in the can.
Okay.
So it's
great.
It's
how can you estimate the amount of sort of hours that you are putting into each episode of your podcast?
Not enough.
But also too much.
Well, yeah. The reason it's not enough. I mean, I'm at the stage now where I'm not really having any difficulty recruiting guests. Like I've got enough, and I'm sort of working up the chain because the harsh reality is you have to get people with followings that can help you grow your following early. After you've been at it for a couple of years, you can do the social good thing and bring anybody in. And I've already done a bit of that in my first 10, but I'm going to have to be more business-like about it because it's just the nature of the business. So it doesn't affect the quality of the guests. In fact, they're quality people. But the thing that I'm learning, and actually I love the conversation style. I do research. I come up with sort of lists of questions. I do not provide my guests with any kind of idea what we're going to talk about or anything. A few of them get nervous, but I reassure them, and we just go conversation style, and we just see how it goes.
Like today.
Like today. The problem is Debbie, that the thing that I'm not doing well enough is I just interviewed, and it was just published, I think, today by a podcast called Journeys of the No Schedule Man. And Kevin Bulmer in London, Ontario, he interviewed me. So it's up on Journeys of the No Schedule Man. I'll be posting it for anybody that goes to my links, we'll be posting it as well. But, I looked at what the work Kevin did after the fact. Like, he recorded a really thoughtful introduction, much greater than I've been doing, with his insights into what he took from my conversations and why people should listen to this. He wrote a really, really nice, document on the episode page that sort of highlighted, the things that he thought were the golden nuggets and stuff like that. That is extremely time-consuming, stuff. And I'm going to be honest enough to say that with everything that I've had going on, I haven't invested the time that I hope to in the future. It's one of the reasons I was on the verge of going to 2 a week, because if you want to monetize, the more you publish. But I said I can't, because I can do the physical act of the interview and I can get a good interview in the can. I will advise people right now. I do hope people will subscribe on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher, or we're everywhere, or at screwthenaysayers.com. But the first several episodes, I talk too much. Here I'm talking a lot, but I'm supposed to. I'm the guest.
You're being interviewed.
Yeah, but I did too much of that with some of the early guests, but there's only one way to learn this part of the business, and that's to do it. And I've actually hired somebody that specializes in preparing people to be guests on these kind of shows. One of the very most successful individuals in the United States at doing it, and he's right in the middle of this thing. He's 31 years old, and I think his income is probably approaching 7 digits. So he's doing something right, Mm-hmm. But just to get that objective opinion, not subjective, objective opinion.
Yeah.
I would say to you that, it should be taking, 50% of a normal working week, to do a good job on
about 15 hours.
20. Yeah, probably 20 hours or so.
That's a big investment.
And that, in my case, I don't do the audio editing. I have an amazing guy, a sound studio. I just take the recordings and put it up in the cloud. He does that work. So far, since I started, for the next 4 months or so, I've got an amazing university student working with me this summer. She designed all the graphics, for the front of the covers and the uploading those things to the various places. And the other week, a couple of nights ago, I was sitting there thinking I'm relaxed, and I'm getting emails from one of the individuals in the States who's been so helpful in helping me spread the word, to encourage his listeners to he's just doing me a huge favor. I cannot name him, because it's really that sensitive, in the sense that he does it so rarely. And I just got introduced to him by a friend, and he said, we talked, and he said, we're almost the same age. And he said, you know what, I'll do this. But he started asking me for links that I couldn't find. And I'm going all over the place. And, Sammy's out. That's my student was out in Toronto competing for St. Mary's University this week, and in Actus Awards. And I'm going through and I'm logging on. I'm looking for, HTML files of, MP3 downloads. And you know what this shit is? I don't. I know what an MP3 file is, but that's about it. I found it, but it took me, if I had the knowledge, 30 seconds. It took me 4 hours, This is what you're going to go through. And you actually have to do it yourself. You can outsource some of the stuff, but if you don't know how to do it yourself, then when somebody's not around, you're screwed, Well,
that's the thing. You in many ways, I think approaching content production, you have to be really careful about what you outsource. Most people are on a budget, and you can outsource everything. There are people to provide you every single service at every single price. So you could outsource everything and still be just as busy managing all of the outsourcers. Yeah.
You have to be careful. And I want to say this too, though, because this is another thing that I think is really important. 2 things, actually, if you'll allow me. One is that it's very difficult. There's a lot of sharks in the water, I guess is the way I would put it this way. There's a lot of people, in my experience over the last 6 to 12 months, that were only too willing to try and separate me from my money. And it's something that I've never feared in business. Well, I don't fear, but it's something that I was never very much prone to, because I'm a pretty smart business person and I've kind of seen all the things before. But when you start getting into vocabulary and language in areas that you don't understand, it gets a lot harder. So my first recommendation to anybody who's thinking about going the path, whether it's for the book or whether it's for a podcast, find somebody that's done it successfully and ask them who they worked with. Because, it's Russian roulette when you just go onto the internet and grab somebody. Very important. The second thing that I think maybe the biggest lesson I've learned through this whole process that I would share with your listeners and with you is that communication is beyond important. And the challenge from my side of the desk in I'm talking a little bit about the work we've done together, but certainly all sorts of other conversations. This is not anything at all specific. And I want to be really clear, it's not. But here's the thing. I come into this not knowing what I don't know. So I don't know what I don't know. So I make best effort to communicate what I think I want. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'm wrong. And then the flip side, coming from the other side, is that people are using language back to me where I think I understand what people are saying to me. But in truth, we've got different. This is the nice thing about the English language in particular. Words can have a lot of different, nuances and everything else. So communication is beyond important. So from this side of the desk, you've just got to stick your hand up and say, I don't have a fucking clue what you're talking about. So back it up and tell me. And if somebody gets impatient with you, then get rid of them. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get into a mess. And the flip side is, I think anybody that's serving this industry has to be ultra aware of the fact that we're experts in what we do. We're experts in our content, but we don't know just enough to be dangerous. I can't tell you what a good platform is for a website. I can't tell you, font or color or page weight or how many, I can't.
How many times have I said to you, I'm not a designer. I'm sorry. I can't help. I'm not a copywriter.
But, and even when it comes to the monetization or whatever, so I have prided myself for, in my early business years, I would acknowledge that I'm an A personality, and my communication style was at times not as respectful as it should have been. It has been a very long time since I've been in situations where communications have broken down to the extent that they have in the last 6 months. One to the point, where I felt so totally disrespected that I just gave the guy basically $5,000 and said, I don't even want what you're doing for me. Just go away. I just can't work with you, Yeah. So if a guy like me at this stage in my life that is as self-aware as I am, I'm not bragging, but I'm a very self-aware person, gets caught in these traps, then the industry itself needs to, and the differentiation opportunity for providers is to stand out in that area, to excel at that communication, to not make assumptions, and for heaven's sakes, to not take on something that you're not certain you can do.
Absolutely.
Better to find somebody to do it, eh?
Or as I sometimes do, very clear with my clients, I'm not exactly sure how this is going to go. Here's my approach and my attempt, and let's take a look at it on the other side of the experience and reevaluate.
Yeah, and I think that's really important.
But there are so many people out there, and there's a lot of people indicating that other young people should do this is really just go get the sale, get the money, and then figure out how to do it later. And I think that's really problematic because it causes so much stress and so many unhappy clients.
It's not a sustainable business thing. It is 20 to 7 Nova Scotia time here, and the barbecue's on, and the sun's
My
still
stomach has been grumbling. It's 5:30 here.
You may wish to cut this into 2 episodes and put it up on YouTube's twice. or something like that. It's up to you, but
perhaps, yeah, that's a really good suggestion. I do appreciate that, because I know that 2 videos gets twice the amount of views,
and the odds of somebody staying with it the whole time. But it's lots of content. Would you mind, once it's up, if we brought that and see if I could edit little clips out of it or something like that?
Please,
Okay.
I don't know, any little clips you want to grab.
Yeah,
please,
Sammy's really skilled as a video editor, and she's got the best technology and everything. So, I mean, we may be able to just get some little inserts or something like that we can use. So.
Sounds great. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Tim, for taking the time with me today, and I really appreciate your insights. If anybody in the audience is interested, Tim is available at www.screwthenaysayers.com. And you can get a copy of his free book at that website, as well as listen to the podcast episodes that are up.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.